In the sun-baked suburbs of modern Athens, construction workers building Greece's new National Opera House made a discovery that would send shockwaves through the archaeological world. What they unearthed wasn't ancient pottery or marble statues, but something far more chilling: the systematic remains of a mass execution that occurred over 2,600 years ago. 80 young men lay in perfect rows, their wrists still bound by corroded iron shackles, their final moments frozen in time. Who were these victims, and why were they executed with such methodical precision in ancient Greece? The answer may lie buried in one of history's most violent political upheavals, a failed coup that nearly toppled the city of Athens itself. The Phaleron Delta Necropolis, where this gruesome discovery emerged, stretches across a vast ancient cemetery that served Athens for nearly 4 centuries, from the 8th to the 4th century BC. Unlike the grand marble tombs we associate with classical Greece, this was a burial ground for the common people, slaves, and society's forgotten masses. Over 1,500 skeletons have been recovered from this sprawling cemetery, telling stories of plague, poverty, and ordinary death. But the mass grave discovered in 2016 stood apart from everything else found there. Stella Chrysolaki, the lead archaeologist directing the excavation, described the scene with scientific precision tinged with evident emotion. The skeletons were arranged in 3 distinct trenches, with 39 victims laid out in the first trench alone, their bodies positioned in neat rows, as if arranged by someone who took care in their burial, despite the violence of their deaths. Most striking were the iron shackles still clamped around their wrists, the metal corroded after millennia, but still clearly visible as restraints that bound these men in their final hours. The bioarchaeological analysis conducted by Swedish researchers revealed disturbing details about these victims. They were predominantly young men, mostly in their 20s and 30s, with excellent dental health and robust physiques that suggested they came from privileged backgrounds rather than the typical inhabitants of this working-class cemetery. Their teeth showed none of the wear patterns associated with coarse foods eaten by slaves or laborers. Instead, these appeared to be well-fed aristocrats or their followers who had met a violent end. The evidence of their execution method proved equally revealing. Many of the skeletons showed extensive perimortem trauma, particularly to the skull, suggesting they were killed by blunt force trauma to the head. The positioning of some bodies indicated they may have been executed at the edge of the burial pits, simply falling forward into their graves as they died. Yet despite this brutal end, the careful arrangement of the bodies and the presence of burial goods suggested these weren't common criminals discarded without ceremony. 2 small pottery vessels, specifically trefoil oinokoi, found among the shackled remains, provided the crucial dating evidence that placed this mass execution between 650 and 625 BC. This time frame corresponds exactly with one of the most turbulent periods in early Athenian history, when the city-state was torn apart by political upheaval and social revolution. To understand who these victims might have been, we must journey back to the chaotic world of 7th century Athens, a time when democracy was still a distant dream and aristocratic families fought bloody battles for political control. The city was suffering from economic hardship, poor harvests, and growing inequality between the wealthy elite and the struggling masses. Into this powder keg stepped a man named Cylon, an Olympic champion whose athletic victory in 640 BC had elevated him to celebrity status throughout the Greek world. Cylon wasn't content with athletic glory. Married to the daughter of Theagenes, the tyrant of nearby Megara, he possessed both the connections and ambition necessary for a political coup. According to the ancient historians Thucydides and Plutarch, Cylon consulted the oracle at Delphi, seeking divine guidance for his planned seizure of power. The oracle's response was cryptic but encouraging. He should attempt his coup during a festival of Zeus. Cylon interpreted this as referring to the Olympic Games, unaware that the oracle meant a different festival entirely. In 632 BC, Cylon struck. Supported by soldiers provided by his father-in-law and joined by a group of aristocratic supporters who shared his vision of overthrowing the existing government, he attempted to seize the Acropolis of Athens. The plan was to establish himself as tyrant and rule the city through a combination of popular support and military force. For a brief moment, it seemed the coup might succeed. However, Cylon had fatally misread both the oracle and the mood of the Athenian people. Rather than rising up to support him, the citizens of Athens remained loyal to the existing government. The coup quickly collapsed, and Cylon and his followers found themselves trapped in the most sacred place in Athens, the Temple of Athena on the Acropolis. With government forces surrounding them and no hope of escape, the conspirators faced a desperate siege. What happened next became one of the most infamous episodes in Athenian history. According to ancient sources, the government archons, led by a man named Megacles, promised the trapped conspirators safe passage if they surrendered and agreed to stand trial. To ensure their safety, the rebels tied ropes to the statue of Athena in the temple and held onto them as they descended from the Acropolis, believing this would place them under the goddess's protection. The promise of mercy proved to be a lie. As Thucydides recorded, the rope broke as the conspirators made their way to trial, which the archons interpreted as a sign that Athena herself had withdrawn her protection. In the massacre that followed, Cylon managed to escape with his brother, but most of his supporters were not so fortunate. They were executed en masse, some reportedly killed even at the altars of sacred temples, a sacrilege that would haunt Athens for generations. The slaughter of Cylon's followers created what became known as the Cylonian curse, a religious pollution that Athenians believed had brought divine wrath upon their city. The archons who ordered the executions, particularly Megacles and his family line, were considered accursed, and their descendants faced exile and persecution for centuries afterward. Even Pericles, the great Athenian statesman, would later be attacked by political enemies who reminded voters that he was descended from the cursed Megacles. Could the shackled skeletons of Phaleron be the remains of Cylon's executed supporters? The evidence is tantalizing, but not definitive. The dating of 650 to 625 BC places the mass burial in the right historical period, and the high social status of the victims matches what we would expect of aristocratic conspirators. The systematic nature of their execution, with victims bound and killed by blows to the head, aligns with ancient accounts of mass executions following political upheavals. The location also supports this theory. Phaleron served as Athens' primary port before the development of Piraeus, making it a logical place for the disposal of politically sensitive remains. The careful burial of the bodies, despite their violent deaths, suggests these weren't common criminals, but individuals whose deaths required some measure of respect, perhaps to avoid further inflaming religious sensibilities, already outraged by the sacrilegious nature of their executions. However, bioarchaeologist Christina Kilgrove cautions against jumping to conclusions. As she noted when the discovery was first announced, the historical records for 7th century Athens are fragmentary at best, and there could be numerous explanations for a mass grave of shackled victims. Political upheavals were common in this period, and mass executions following failed coups or rebellions were not unusual in the ancient world. The scientific analysis continues to reveal new details about these mysterious victims. DNA testing is being conducted in hopes of determining their geographic origins and possible family relationships. The Swedish bioarchaeological team has documented evidence of the victims' lifestyles through analysis of their bone structure and muscle attachment points, suggesting many were accustomed to physical activity consistent with military training or athletic pursuits. One skeleton was found with an arrowhead embedded in his chest, while another had an iron knife placed alongside his remains. These weapons might represent the tools of their execution, or possibly grave goods intended to accompany them to the afterlife. The presence of such items adds another layer of complexity to understanding both how these men died and how their contemporaries viewed their deaths. The broader context of the Phaleron cemetery provides additional insights into this turbulent period of Athenian history. The necropolis contains evidence of various social classes and burial practices, from simple pit graves for the poor to more elaborate arrangements for higher status individuals. The mass graves stand out not only for their violence, but also for breaking normal burial patterns, suggesting they represent extraordinary events rather than routine mortality. Recent developments have added new significance to this discovery. In 2025, the Greek government approved construction of a dedicated museum at the site, recognizing the international importance of the Phaleron findings. The new facility will house not only the shackled skeletons, but also the broader collection of remains that tell the story of ordinary Athenians during the crucial centuries when their city was developing into the birthplace of democracy. The implications of the Phaleron discovery extend far beyond solving a single historical mystery. These skeletons provide unprecedented insight into the violent political struggles that shaped early Athens, reminding us that the development of democratic institutions was neither smooth nor inevitable. The young men who died with shackles on their wrists were casualties of the same political upheavals that would eventually give birth to concepts of citizenship, political participation, and individual rights. Moreover, the careful scientific analysis of these remains demonstrates how modern bioarchaeology can breathe life into ancient historical accounts. Where once we had only the words of ancient historians like Thucydides and Plutarch, we now have the physical evidence of trauma, the chemistry of diet preserved in bones, and the DNA that can tell us about family relationships and geographic origins. The mystery of the shackled skeletons also highlights the importance of rescue archaeology in urban development. Had it not been for the legal requirement to conduct archaeological surveys before construction of the National Opera House and Library, this remarkable discovery might have been lost forever under concrete and steel. Each urban development project in historically significant areas represents both an opportunity for discovery and a race against time to preserve the past. As research continues, new questions emerge about these ancient victims. Were they all followers of Cylon? Or do they represent multiple episodes of political violence? Did their execution follow legal procedures of the time? Or was it an extrajudicial massacre? How did their families and supporters react to their deaths? And what role did this violence play in shaping subsequent Athenian political development? The answers may never be fully known, but the ongoing investigation of the Phaleron skeletons continues to yield new insights. Advanced isotope analysis can potentially determine where these men grew up and what they ate, providing clues about their social status and geographic origins. Microscopic analysis of their bones may reveal evidence of diseases or injuries that shaped their lives before their violent deaths. The shackled skeletons of Phaleron stand as silent witnesses to one of history's most consequential periods, when the foundations of Western political thought were being forged in violence and upheaval. Whether they are indeed the remains of Cylon's supporters or victims of some other forgotten political catastrophe, they remind us that the ideals we associate with ancient Athens, democracy, justice, and civic participation, emerged from a world far darker and more violent than our romanticized image of classical antiquity suggests. In the end, these 80 young men, with their corroded shackles and trauma-marked skulls, may represent something even more significant than the solution to a specific historical mystery. They embody the countless anonymous victims of political violence whose sacrifices, willing or unwilling, shaped the course of human civilization. Their story, pieced together from bones and pottery shards, reminds us that behind every great historical transformation lie individual human beings who paid the ultimate price for the political struggles of their age.